Hi, I think today we actually going to be having another one-on-one mentoring as a part of the Agile Business Leaders course. And here is Caprias again, who's got a few queries about how to strategize cloud offerings and how to present such things to stakeholders, internal and external, to the organization. Yes, Caprias, please go ahead.
Yeah, so to give some context around this, so we have been moving in digital transformation, and we already have started off our journey towards public cloud, private cloud, right? And with regards to this, we started onboarding our workloads to various public clouds. However, there was a gap which was found that even though we went ahead with a few regions based on certain parameters or considerations at that time, but now there's a need to see or define a proper strategy regarding what public cloud regions are supposed to be used and how it will benefit in the long run. So normally we go ahead from a 5 years plan, how it will be more strategically, how we can place our workloads more strategically and uh, in terms of getting optimizing the cost, optimizing the performance, and overall like getting a good view of catering to the overall geolocation based customers from B2C angle, B2B angle, and the employees themselves from B2E. So we do have not only we are hosting or building our own applications, but we are also moving towards SaaS-based deployment models. So we do consume a lot of SaaS services. Then our services are also being consumed by many other uh, partners. So based on this, we need to define a proper cloud strategy. We have the top three clouds with us, so, and a private cloud. So we need to see how we can define a strategy, if we can build a framework around it, and say that okay, these are the architecture principles which we would like to consider while defining the strategy. And this is the organization vision and how it can align with the strategy. Uh, then then how we can take different cloud providers which we have, and what are the parameters to consider from those cloud providers in order to align with our strategy. So this is a, I mean, a short context which I think is would give us some idea on how to proceed on defining the strategy. First of all, like I want to know like how industry defines this whole strategy, or how the CISOs are defining the strategy, and how it is dripping down to the lower levels with all from very high level conceptual ideas to low level technical placements of those ideas.
Yeah, so first of all, is this private sector organization, or is it a quasi-government or semi-government or completely a government enterprise that you plan to put stuff to the public cloud?
So it's a, you can take it as a private sector. So
Okay.
there, so there might be requirements of regulatory requirements. That is one of the important considerations in terms of. So we do have people from all over the world who are employees as well as customers. And depending on the regulatory requirements, the data also needs to be uh, secure and abide to the regulatory requirements. So that is one of the important considerations which needs to be taken care.
Is the data allowed to ingress or egress outside of the country of consideration, or it has to be localized within the country of operations. So that would be one regulatory thing, especially if it's banking or financial institution, or even otherwise they have country specific rules. So if that is the case, then the data shouldn't leave the country of operation. So that could be one consideration. Is that also the case?
Uh, so yes, that is a case. So I also need to understand how different it is. So in terms of like customers who are accessing, their PI data is also taken. So how these requirements will imply to that. Then there are employees who are on a moving profile. So, and they are accessing our internal applications like HR, this training programs. So, how it will impact those employees. And there are B2B partners who want to integrate with us to get some information or data. So, how this whole regulatory thing will also impact them. So, these are the three personas which we have right now: B2B, B2E, and B2C. So, the whole idea,
He is B2 business to enterprise, right?
business to employee. So,
Employee. Okay.
business to customer,
Business.
business to employee, and B2B is business to business.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I think we'll have to have various different strategies of for all of these three. So B2B business, both the businesses should be okay with their data lying on the public cloud, for which you'll have to have some personalization and depersonalization data that should be segregated, saying that this data can lie on the cloud, this data shouldn't be on the cloud. Or if both the parties are agreeing, then jointly you sign an agreement saying that we are safe that this, but it should not leave the country of operation. So you'll have to bring out those kind of regulations and those things. So B2E is maybe only the employees should be able to see the data, or maybe the employees manager should be able to see that. You have to have all those kind of RBAC access, rule-based access control kind of a features for that level of detail. And B2C is the obviously the data shouldn't leave the geography of operations of that particular country. So if you have got AWS in Dubai, it should be hosted in AWS Dubai. It should not be in some data center in the US, maybe. Things like that. So you can actually have those kind of details. Then you can actually have data regulations around them, data at rest, data in motion. What is the encryption, decryption that you need to provide, and so are you going? So is it a SaaS based thing, or is it as PaaS and SaaS, all three that you're planning to migrate? So that is also something that you need to check. So
So,
are you going to do a
uh,
lift and shift of all the three tiers, or it's only one?
yeah, so we have SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS. And so it's not mostly a migration thing. It's like we are already on certain regions and we want to formally say that, okay, these are the regions as per our strategy. So there is no strategy right now. And if you know that at one level, when there's auditing and all, we need to have all these kind of documents, artifacts in place in order to say that, okay, this is how we have defined, these are the reasons where we have defined these, selected this regions as our this, and what is the 5-year strategy for in terms of our organizational growth, or how the overall structure will change, and if it changes, are we still valid with the current strategy?
Correct, correct. So you should have a strong program about perhaps I think three different regions: B2B, B2C, and B2E. You can actually have three different approaches, but maybe 50% of the commonality in the three approaches can be part of the overall strategy. And also the vendor choosing. So are you leaning more towards AWS or Azure or Google GCP? So that is another thing that you can actually create some kind of, like, in case you're an existing shop which is huge, getting huge discounts already on AWS, you can go with that. But if it's like your white labeling solutions and the customer is getting some benefit from Azure, so let us say you go with those kind of offerings. And if it is a hybrid model wherein there is cross-sell, upsell opportunities, then you go with whatever is a stack that's comfortable for both of you. And so, but all of these things you can actually say vendor marketing decisions. You'll have to put these as the approaches when you are actually discussing. And then in the as also, what is the kind of offerings that you're looking at? Because there's a whole gamut of software that you would be. So you should precisely figure out, okay, for the frontier, for the SaaS-based solutions. So you have to say that this is my technology stack, and these are the components in all the three tiers that we are going to be using. And we'll mix and match these into the different tiers as we go on. That is one approach. Then the other one is if you're doing some lift and shift, or if you're just choosing one cloud provider, then what about the legacy? Or is it born in the cloud, or do they have some legacy? That is something that you need to check. So are they already trying to migrate from some existing cloud to the cloud native kind of a thing, or is it they don't have any legacy and they're doing everything in the cloud? In that case, obviously, you'll have to look into things like what is the portability, vendor agnostic nature of the design of the cloud, so that you're not vendor locked into some servers or some hardware and software over a period of time.
So
So
right now, Kiran, so the clouds are already decided, so that's not a problem right now.
okay, so
Problem is
basically,
more towards,
what is the
so
choice?
all three clouds, we need to know what are the best regions to plan the strategy for. So, for example, if we have Dublin, we have Singapore, if we have something Bahrain or UAE. So, if I am located in, for example, UAE, then what is the best course of my headquarters or something is in UAE. So, is it the right? What is the right approach in terms of B2E, B2B, for example? Then B2C is a totally different gamut of things which we need to think about, basically in terms of how the customers across the globe will be accessing the applications which we are hosting here, or something in other aspect. We need to see how uh, what are the applications if we are hosting in a particular region interacting with the backend services or data center services over here. So, I mean, these are the things which I'm looking for, and I mean, at least to frame the things in a proper way. So, for example, um, the first thing which I did is like collecting all the information, like how many SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS applications are there right now, and where are they located? Like, if SaaS is there, then the vendor might have located in something like Netherlands or somewhere in Europe or somewhere in US. Mm. So IS is something which we are hosting and developing, which might be somewhere in, for example, India, which is the headquarters, for example. So how do I align these three personas and
Yeah,
say that,
so
okay,
I think, yeah, what you will have to do is figure out what are your drivers, what is the strategy. So strategy for the moving into the cloud is obviously cost savings, or do you have any other kind of, so you have to first put out your strategy, high level mission, basically moving to the cloud. So is it CapEx to OpEx, then cloud, auto scaling, load balancing, high availability, lower costs, lower operating costs, then reduced manpower. So what are, list out all the attributes that are, the management is considering for enabling this kind of a thing. Security, for instance, is another parameter that you need to look in, and how much of cost that you're going to be spending. Also, cost would be a driver. Efficiency, manpower, operational efficiency, IT efficiency, overall efficiency, all of these, put down all the drivers that you feel are the ones that are pushing you to do this exercise firstly. Secondly, you do what are the factors that is pushing B2B, B2E, B2C into the cloud. So we've taken a strategy to move en masse everything into the cloud, but we have different market segments. So for B2B, it would be both the companies should be agreeing that their data is on a public cloud, and perhaps do we say choose a center in Singapore or Dublin or the UAE itself will be based on how close these companies are to those locations, because you might need to edge cache them, and edge caching data might actually require CDN servers and they may be expensive. So if they are closer to the area of operations, then that's where you edge cache the data instead of over the wire. And similarly, encryption and decryption, if you're doing, then the cost of those, then if you're doing periodic backups, then understand how much backups you're going to be doing. Then if it's a shared responsibility model for security, then you look at what is that going to involve, and how much is the extent of the security that you might need to provide for the wire and encryption on the wire for those needs. And if it's B2C, then the customer's data should that reside only in that country. Like for instance, if you're e-commerce website and if you're running some, let us say Twitter is operating out of India, but Indian government is given a mandate that all the tweets of Indian citizens should reside within the country of operations, which is India, and it should not be served, it should not be stored on some servers in the US. So similarly, such kind of governance and regulations will come based on if it's B2E. If it is B2E, then should the data of that company reside outside the firewall of that company? So do you have some regulations like that? You'll have to look into those kind of things. If you're white labeling solutions, then you consider the other company which is co-hosting with you. Do you have multi-tenancy as a feature? Is the data being shared together or is it separate? And what kind of access roles and privileges that you have to segregate the data between these two entities that are there in a B2B scenario? So you could have multi-tenancy in all the three, and whether you are going with vendor lock-in or you're going to be vendor agnostic in your decisions, all of those things you have to figure out as a part of these discussions and as a part of your strategy. And as regards your architecture principles are concerned, I'll kind of share you a list of architecture principles that are there that you could actually use right from auto scaling to various other things that you would come across. So typically you could come into things like how do you auto scale your instances, how do you automate your instances, how do you do server provisioning, for instance. So all of these things can be looked at as principles that you can actually use to figure out all your details regarding that. So basically it would be something like this. You could actually have multiple principles that are there. So one is auto provisioning for shared resources. The second is the how do you performance as a criteria when you choose. So how much of a performance impact is there when you're designing the cloud solutions between AWS, GCP, and so they are the same thing. Is how is the performance being hit in case you're going to host the center in Dublin versus Singapore versus UAE. So that could be another principle that should allow you to look at the service and latency, network latency when you're deciding those kind of things, or if there are failures in regard to the network. And the third one is how do you optimize and automate the cloud solution? So how much of automation are these guys going to provide, one versus the other? So how much of it is going to reduce the operational cost for the cloud provider and service? How much can you meter all of these actions? So these days, cloud providers provide their own metering and billing requirements. So is all of the metering very transparent, or it's not transparent, so that you have a hidden cost at the end of it when you have a monthly bill? You should not be having a big bill that comes to the picture. So basically, automation metering to optimize the solutions can be another principle that you can actually put. And then how do you measure the automation by itself in terms of the real-time usages. So you can actually automate the real-time usage of the cloud, and the deployment can also be automated. The auto provisioning can be another principle. Like how are you going to be doing so? Are you going to be using horizontal scaling versus vertical scaling? So vertical scaling, there is a bit of vendor lock-in there. And if you're doing horizontal scaling, you scale to large number of instances, and then, how do you, is it completely loosely coupled that you are actually looking at? So do you have statelessness as an architecture principle? Is it stateful at some places, especially like if you have one in e-commerce, web cart? So is it stateful, stateless? How much of it is loosely coupled? What kind of cloud, you know, providers are you going to be using? What kind of protocols are you going to be using there? What kind of tools and systems will you enable? All of these things. And the other point is how much of service abstraction will you be providing when you're trying to look at these things, and what kind of control will you have all those fine-grained services in terms of, let us say, the hypervisor needs to be turned on, turned off. If you need to spin off new instances, how much of, let us say, if you're doing something on the IaaS layer, like do you have infrastructure as a code, IAC kind of a control there? We have tools for that, like Ansible, Puppet, and Chef, and all of those kind of details that is there. Then if you're looking at multi-tenancy, how do you enable multi-tenancy? Yeah, as a principle, as I told you, if you got multiple people who are co-located in the same database, so you differentiate them using different schemas or different table spaces, or whatever is the criteria that you're actually doing for sharding. So that actually has to come across as one of the details that would be there. And typically, that is something that you need to focus on as well additionally. So I'll share you those kind of principles and how do you craft those kind of principles. So there is a structured way in which you create a principle, especially in these kind of strategic documents. So which is like you just name the principle, explain the principle in a statement. Then you say what is the rationale or the business benefit that principle gives, and say what is the kind of implications of not following that principle. What is that you tend to lose. So you can actually create those kind of details. So I'll share you those. Typically, these kind of principles are used by all the top five, top four, consulting companies in their strategy documents when they make high-level presentations like this. So you can actually use those kind of details also when it's coming to that. And apart from that, you will have to factor how you're going to be storing the data, what is the network latency, what is the throughput, provisioning. Yes, Capis, please go ahead. You had something?
No. I was just so yeah. So maybe I'll. I mean, you can forward me those principles. I'll go through that. What I was thinking is, can we take one persona like B2E, for example, or yeah, B2B, B2E, or B2B. So these two personas. And do we have a template like how industry is defining a strategy? Like, I mean, ready-made template from like.
No, but what are you supposed to provide? Are you supposed to provide from concept to cash, or the entire deployment from the cradle to the grave, or is it only about is it?
No, the final ask, the final conclusion which is to be arrived is that okay, we are having three clouds, and we would be leveraging three regions, for example, which as per our organizational vision, current B2B partners, current B2E users, geolocation based. I'm talking about B2B and B2E right now, and B2C also. So based on these, we are defining like the final statement is that okay, based on all the arguments which we have from the above list, this is what we say that these are the most feasible regions which would help us in moving our the helping in the growth of the I mean aligning with our this organizational growth for the next 5 years. So this is just a regional strategy, like so cloud and all is already the strategy behind selecting cloud, those kind of stuffs and all are already done. But the whole strategy behind within those clouds, what are the regions which we think are the best regions?
Is this the question actually, what I'm typing out?
Correct.
So when you say regions, does it mean country specific or regions within a particular cloud provider?
So it will be regions within a cloud provider.
So let us say that you are going with AWS. Okay, if you're going with AWS, are we saying that it will be Dublin versus Singapore versus UAE? Is that what you think?
No, it's so basically it will be not only this, whatever regions AWS provides. For example, this US East, then Dublin, Singapore, UAE, India, Frankfurt, all these regions, right? So within Europe, I have like multiple regions. Then within Asia Pacific, I have regions. So uh, from the placement perspective, how
But why only three regions? It could be any of these regions, right? So what is
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah. So I'm not saying it's just an example. So uh, how do we define?
so your problem comes about how do you selecting a region? What should be the framework level and decisions that can influence this step, right? This is
Yeah,
typically it.
yeah. So basically, if you see, like for example, I have my sales regions, sales offices in various regions, for example. Then I have B2B partners in various regions, right?
Yeah.
And then I have my employees.
Hmm. So as I told you, if it is going to be sales, then you'll have to be closer to where the data is. Closer to where the data is makes
So
more.
sales will be more. Sales will be more towards the customer, right?
Yeah, where the customer data is. Customer data is, and if it is B2B, then where the companies have their operations. Which,
This is the partners.
correct. So if it is this companies and their allied partners. Okay, so this is very clear. And if it is employees, then obviously where the employee database is. So is it distributed or is it local or is it across the globe? You know, those kind of things. So you have to have these kind of details here. And so this is typically that you would need to consider here. And then you could actually go with a lot of design principles here with regard to all. So this is the high level thing that you need to come up with as to where so first would be obviously pricing is an issue. You'll have to come up with pricing, then auto scaling would be another thing, then maintainability. Okay, maintainability is another one. Then provisioning the resources. Deployment. And is it the same kind of a tech? Is the tech stack same across? What questions you would ask, need to ask is the tech stack same across these three scenarios?
What does that mean?
So basically, let us say you're going with B2B or B2C or B2E. Okay, so if it is that, then do you have IaaS versus PaaS or SaaS in all of three? So do you have all of the three in all the three scenarios, or is it one common solution that is the same for the sales team as well as for the partner team as well as for the employee team? So, or is it a mixture of technical slices that you're going to? Some guys will get front end here, back end here. It's a different, all three different solutions.
Yeah, so B2B is mostly SaaS and
B2B is
sales.
B2B is SaaS, okay, and B2C is what?
B2C is a combination of IaaS and PaaS.
Okay, and B2E is again SaaS.
IaaS.
They don't need any SaaS based employee stuff.
No, so mostly it's like our own HR services, training programs, all those
But
are
they will
like
need some SaaS, no, some kind of SaaS.
maybe yeah, that might be.
No. HR, payroll, and all the things.
Yeah, so these are like all very specific hosted in our
Hmm.
region of operations.
Correct. So you have to look into these things, and then you'll have to security is of course security will be an issue. Then you'll have to look into shared licensing will be another thing. Then
So I mean, the direction which just for B2B and B2E, let's consider on that. So the direction mostly is cost and latency. So let's take these two parameters,
hmm.
which are like most because I think availability and auto scaling, most of the cloud providers are like we assume that they are already providing that. Because without that, I mean, selecting a cloud provider itself will be uh, not done.
Yeah, so basically, let us say your pricing and the cost, but the pricing will be across many of these things. So it will be across how across your security thing, then you will have to have deployment, then shared licensing, then based on your IO throughput, load balancing, some additional tooling that you might have. So the
So
pricing
let's
can
let's
actually
let's
stagger
take
into
an
all of them.
example. Let's take an example of B2E, for example.
Hmm.
Let's take a scenario where I have my so agents who are in a roaming profile. They are moving from one region to another region, right? So then what do they access normally? So for them, the most important things are the organization applications, which are HR, payroll, training, and all those kind of stuffs. So if we take this scenario, and what is the first data I need to collect in this perspective? So what I, from my knowledge, would say that, okay, I have 10 different applications which are B2E applications, and they are hosted in, for example, India, which is headquarters. Then from which region, how many employees, how many agents are accessing is something which we need to see, right?
Yeah,
Am I
but
close?
with the cloud, employees is yes, employees, then simultaneous concurrent connections. Concurrency is another thing that you will have to check. Concurrency of flows usage is something that you will have to check. How many people are concurrently using these systems, and what are the kind of bottlenecks, latency that can come over the network? What is the throughput, then uptime, downtime. Then if it is high availability, then what is the high availability that you need to provide for this? Is it 3 nines or is it 5 nines? That is 99.999. So what is the kind of thing that is being provided? And accordingly, budget for resourcing. And what is the budget? Then what is the security implications? So is it what kind of data? What are you storing? Is it financial data? Is it customer data? It's employee data. So and then depersonalize the data. And then basically, what is the are you using going to be one-way hash of the data, or you're going to buy some buy versus build of any software that will achieve these goals. You'll have to put in all of these kind of things.
So, so for
And then, of
example,
course, your principles, you can craft that. What are your principles that you're actually going to have? So let us say that high availability for employees, high availability is, of course, they need to be, all the systems should be available day and night. So 24 bar 7, it should be available. There's downtime is less. Latency, everybody, all the employees in all the regions should get the same amount of throughput and same user experience. And of course, you can also put user experience as one of the things in this. for the employee. This will be critical for the employee and customers also. And what could be the security implications? What could be the network uptime, downtime? What kind of server environment are you going to be using? Is it going to be, you know, Amazon has multiple ranges of servers that you will load based on the IO input output operations and the CPU usage. You can actually say which kind of servers are you actually going to be trying to use. So all of those things you could actually keep in there as the criteria. And then pricing, and then as I told you, organization drivers for this whole exercises. If so, cost versus user experience uh, versus maintainability versus operational effectiveness. These will be your main drivers that will decide you how to what are the best stack that you will use. So when you say it is this, so has it been decided for B2E, it will be AWS or Google GCP, or it's a combination of all these three things at all these levels?
Yeah, it's a combination of this. So, I mean, public cloud providers might be a combination of all the three or any one. Out of that, which regions are good enough for hosting my workloads? So, for
Okay.
example, India is my headquarter, for example.
Hmm.
So, and most of my B2E applications are hosted in India.
Hmm.
So, for example, then what are the factors I should consider? So, for example, Mumbai. Mumbai is a region which AWS provides. So, if I say that okay, because this most of the B2E applications are in based in India, I will select Mumbai region based on what factors? So,
All of these things: network throughput, bandwidth, latency, high availability, the load balancing, all of these things will be your thing which will decide you. Because if you go more to the edge, then obviously there will be additional network bandwidth cost. There will be ingress, outgress cost of the data that you're trying to move. So over the wire, so if you're closer to the data center, then obviously you have some advantage of saving some money over there. And then regulations. So you can actually have regulations also as one of the big drivers. So regulations and compliance also will be another thing that will help you to drive whatever is the thing. Then availability of support staff. So you can these days remotely monitor instances no matter where they are. But let us say you're trying to do something, a data center is in Mumbai and you're sitting in, let us say, outside of India, and then do you have support personnel who will be able to help those kind of skills? So, cloud skills also, what kind of cloud skills you have will also be a driver with regard to how you're going to drive these initiatives. It could be all of these things.
okay.
And then,
What do you mean by vendor neutral stance?
yeah, vendor neutral stance is, let us say that you are actually going to be choosing a combination of IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS in multiple places. And let us say that you want to be for improving the performance in one of the data centers or in one of the regions, you are bumping up. You're paying for higher instances of an Amazon server instance, like say M2 instance or M3 instance, or whichever is a higher instance, which gives you higher throughput and CPU, IO ops. So whichever has got the higher IO ops, you're going for those kind of machines. So, but you are that M2 instance, you don't have a same thing in Azure, or you don't have M2 of AWS in Google GCP. So you be actually saying that, we will, every time we have a problem of performance, we will use M2 instance of AWS to solve that. That's okay within AWS region. But let us say what happens if you have to fix that in an Azure thing. So if you take a new vendor neutral stance, you will ensure that your architecture is not, vendor tightly coupled to any of those things. So you use whatever is support is there, so long as this level of throughput, this level of efficiency, or this number of concurrent users are supported for the architecture. So that is the kind of call that you will actually take when it comes to those kind of decisions.
Okay. So right now, like to start off with, what I've done is I've collected the data in terms of how many SaaS applications we have, how many IaaS and PaaS applications we have, and what are the regions they are being hosted from. Uh, then then I have another data which is how many users from different regions are accessing our applications. So this is the two data sets which I have right now. So based on this, I need to see what I mean, how do I map these things?
No, come again. What is, I lost you there. What do you say? You have actually,
So
if
there
I'm
are
talking
two
B2E,
data
right?
sets. Yeah.
B2E, right?
So I'm right now concentrating more on B2E and B2B.
Okay.
So I've collected the data sets in terms of how many SaaS applications we have,
Okay.
how many IaaS and how many PaaS applications we have.
Applications, number of PaaS applications, but this would be for, okay, but PaaS applications, why do you need employees to be using PaaS? Because those are mostly for developing tools, right? SaaS, I can understand employees would use. PaaS is using employees are using some PaaS applications.
So not employees, but B2B partners and all.
Okay, yeah, that could be the.
So it's B2B plus B2E. So I've just
Okay, so
so
basically, uh, so you're actually this one, and what are the
nice.
typical parameters required for these applications to run effectively in production? So that this is something that you need to know. Number of concurrent current users, total number of users supported, then network bandwidth requirements for these bandwidth requirements, CPU uptime, downtime, what is the latency that is expected, average transaction response time that you are expecting. And so what you will need to do is, if you are actually having, say, let us say you host it in Dublin versus you host it in Asia Pac, which guy will take what amount of time for a round trip across the network and show you some data. So what is the cost of edge caching servers across multiple regions that you need to. So you will need to have these, then cost of shared resources, shared responsibility, the models, you'll have to actually including Just 1 second. Yeah, so including security, to put this as one of the criterias. So figure out basically for these applications to run, what is the CPU, RAM, hypervisor requirements, hypervisor requirements. Do we have, are these guys Dockerized, Docker or Kubernetes environment? Do you need them, or is it Mesos? And what kind of deployment skills would be required for these? What kind of vendor licensing you would need needed for these applications? Then how is the CI/CD, CI/CD or DevOps, we might call it DevOps environment for these applications. Next is, are these in-house applications, or are they vendor backed applications? To have this detail. So all of these things will help you to figure out, how do you kind of have a strategy towards them, and what kind of principles you need to follow, and then what is the open source versus the paid software. So, how do you kind of do this? That is something that you will need to figure out. And yeah, so pretty much all of these things, and then I'll just tell you a few other things as well.
So, so if I take a B2E, and so right now the data which I have is the number of SaaS applications, IaaS, PaaS, right? So
Mm.
total number of applications,
Mm.
then they are in which regions,
Mm.
hosted in which regions,
Mm.
and then I have the number of
Currently hosted in which regions. Okay, and obviously all these cloud providers actually will have a guidance on how to use which region for actually what. So you will have their own guidance. So go with the guidance of the cloud provider. So there is no point, let us say if you got some data in Asia Pac, and there's no point hosting it on a server in Dublin, right? You should not be using a Dublin instance there, unless of course you've got somebody in Europe who's going to use that data. So that is given. Those kind of things are a given, right? So typically those guidelines would be given by the CSP. Unless of course you have a strong reasons to host it in Dublin, you should not be doing that.
okay.
So these are some of the things that you do. Then data at rest. So basically of all these solutions, what is the data in rest, data in transit, data over the wire. So this will help you to figure out what are the kind of encryption, decryption requirements that I would need. Encryption, decryption requirements that you would need for actually helping this transition or things like that. So basically, what is the kind of data, and then also whether the hosting servers are available, or you will procure them from the marketplace. So this is also another consideration that you can actually put when you are actually doing it. So if you are going to be, or you could actually automate this uh, using a cloud uh, provider. And one more thing that you will need to do very strongly is basically understand the tech stack end to end of the deployment scenarios for all of B2E, B2B, B2C, and B2E. So you need to figure out the deployment scenarios for all of them, including licensing, packaging, edge cat, everything. Like like in a B2B, what is your tech stack? So basically, define your reference architecture and tech stack for all of these scenarios, which will help iron out the missing ends. So once you do this, it becomes clear, like you should have a reference architecture, one for B2B, one for B2C, one for B2E. And in each of them, what is the target deployment and how are you going to be deploying each of them? So if you're saying that on PaaS, we have so many components, on IaaS, on SaaS, this is what it is in each of these categories. And these are the things that will influence my decision of which region to pick up based on the reference architecture. And based on these attributes, we will decide that cost and ease of maintenance and user effectiveness, user experience and maintainability and portability. We are in favor of this particular region. And also we will take the guidance from the cloud provider also to make this decision happen. So if you can actually put this across in your presentation, I think it will be a good thing. Make sense?
Yeah.
So
Next
this
step
is how,
for deployment scenarios for all B2B, B2B, B2C.
yeah, you have to figure out your target architecture and identify your target architecture and your deployment scenarios. How are you going to be deploying? So are you going to be Dockerizing them? Are you going to be using infrastructure as a cloud kind of infrastructure as a code kind of a provision, or using Chef Puppet, Docker, Kubernetes? Like how are you going to be deploying those things? So first get that reference architecture, get the deployment scenarios, and once that is done, the rest of the exercise becomes much more easier to do.
Okay.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And then security, what is the volume of operations, like how much of volume of data that you're doing? So network bandwidth, is network going to be expensive resource? Is it, what are the data security best practices, data breaches, data security, data provisioning, data licensing, and data integrity, compliance for GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA. So whichever is the regulatory definition for the employee data, customer data, what kind of security audits need to be done periodically, what kind of evaluations, what kind of multi-factor authentications you need to do, what are the training requirements that you might actually need to have, what are the application performance details that you will need to, what are the, what is the user data, user has access to what level of data, and what is the role-based access in each of these levels, and how do you anticipate for the changes in volume of the data when there is peak and non-peak hours. So what is the data lifecycle? How much of it is deleted, retired, purged when it's no longer needed? So how do you handle an incident response system here? How do you handle ticketing? How do you do operations? So if you can actually bring out all of these things based on these two things, then I think you will be in a place to make a powerful impact.
Okay.
Make sense? Okay, please.
Yeah. So
Okay.
reference architecture, tech stack for all these scenarios, which will Plan out the missing ends and deployment
Just
scenarios.
basically what it means is you should know how these solutions are deployed end to end, like what will be their front and back end, and how do you deploy them, what kind of DevOps environment, what kind of production details, is it Dockerized, is it Kubernetes is enabled, Chef, Puppet, all those scenarios. What is the licensing, shared licensing, what is vendor provided, what is put by you, what needs to be there in the long run. So will they take care of it? Will we need to take care of it? So once you have all of those details, the deployment details, as well as the reference architecture, then you can say that, okay, this is how I'm going to, and if you put these in this particular region, this is the cost. So you just, they have a costing calculator also. Most vendors will have a costing calculator, which you should be discussing upfront. So make use of a costing calculator from the vendor, ask for them as well. Sometimes they're not very transparent. Ask for transparency, saying that this is the load of the server and this is the usage and all those things. You can actually figure out these things, and once you've done that, it will tell you what is the kind of load that you can anticipate and which region makes the best sense. Then it will become a no-brainer to make that decision. So you don't need to say, I need to break my head to figure out, okay, should I put it here, should I put it there. So then it will be just an easy guess to say which region. Once you have all of these questions answered, you don't need to second guess which region you will need to put your stuff. It will become a natural choice. Make sense?
Yeah, so I mean, tech stack end-to-end deployment scenarios for all B2B, B2C, B2E. Okay, so these are the applications which are deployed for these personas, and how are they being accessed and how are they
How are they
being
being accessed? How are they being deployed in production? How are they being used also? So basically, how are they being used? So once you know that, what are the requirements of these things in terms of hardware, software, basically all the hardware, software, and deployment, you will actually be in a much better position to say that these are the kind of complexities, these are the challenges, software, security, tools, deployment complexities. So if you know these things, it becomes much easier for you to, figure out which region you should be picking, and then you are already answering the question yourself if you do that.
I mean, how will I hardware, software security? So that means I need to get these details and then I have to go to the.
Yeah, you'll have to figure out. See, basically, I need to. How are you putting these in the cloud currently? So, if you're saying that this is what is the cloud, what is the server composition? What is the licensing cost, deployment plus licensing cost currently? So, licensing cost involved with regard to all of these things. Basically, your applications and your surround applications also. When you say applications, you should also look at.
But how do I map this to a region?
So region is just a abstraction for, you could be in any region, right? So once you actually deploying a particular application, it's region agnostic. You can put it in any region, it will continue to work. Only thing is in your cost and network and other things will go up or down. So once you figure out that you actually are working in this, and what is also find out what is the target audience for this application. So where is the target audience? Where do they reside? So basically figure that out. Where do they reside? And in which country do they reside, or which region? And so what is the affinity of the servers in that region to cater to those requests from those users. So basically, if you do this, you can actually find out that, okay, I've got certain users in Middle East or EMEA region, and I need to actually have these servers which are located in this particular, regions, which will enable you to. So basically, you should know what is the target deployment, what is the licensing cost, what is the end, how do you deploy, first of all, how do you deploy the stack in the cloud? So if you're saying a SaaS-based application, what are all the current, okay, and one more thing is identify basically the current billing issues with the various cloud stack endpoints. So how much are you paying for the network interface? How much are you paying for SMS, for instance? How much are you paying for EC2 instance? How much are you paying for elastic load balancers or things? You just find out all of the things, where are they residing, and across platforms, vendors, and deployment environments. So once you have this detail, then you can say that, okay, currently they are across here. Our app server is in a region. Our web server is in another region. So why not bring it both together? So you can actually make those kind of decisions, which will be about consolidating all your infrastructure needs. So once that is done, then you can actually do a good job of ensuring that your region complexity is taken care of. So which region? So basically, what is the what is the target deployment? How do you look at all of these things and deploy a particular thing in the cloud? So is it everything in one cloud, or is it in a multi-cloud scenario? So is it a multi-cloud based scenarios that you are there? You have to figure out this out, or is it like for one particular SaaS or PaaS application, everything is AWS, or everything is Google, or everything is Azure? So you'll have to figure this also out.
Okay.
I'll share you some principles that you can use, and once you basically the how do you put the drivers? So what is your driver? Yeah, first thing is you have to ask your customers, what is your driver? When I'm making the decision, is it ease of use? Is it operational effectiveness? Is it IT effectiveness? Is it business effectiveness? Or so what are the drivers that are making you plan for this? Is pricing the most important thing? Licensing the most? Security, is that the regulation, is that the main one? So you have to figure out what your drivers are, put your business problem selection between the regions. What are the drivers influencing? What are the parameters? Come to the reference architecture, deployment styles that are currently deployed, and then you summarize saying that if you choose in this region, this is what you tend to get. If you put it in this region, this is what you tend to gain. And this comes with all of these things come with this cost. And if it's region 1, this is the cost implication. If it's region 2, this is the cost. If it's region 3, this will be the cost.
Okay.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, do you know about any particular template which, I mean, like it's like more in terms of like.
For this, see, this is a very specific problem. You'll not get any templates per se like that. What you will get is you'll get how do you kind of cloud strategy documents. I'll see something and try to send you so you can get something like that, but you'll not get a template for this particular problem, which is a unique problem. So yours is B2B, B2E, B2C. So you'll not, but you'll have to use that template, and I'll tell you how to make the template work for you. But I've already given you the indicator. So if you fill in all of these things, that itself becomes a template.
Okay.
So I'll tell you how strategy can be done. So, but if you take all of these parameters, and if you go back to your stakeholders and say, give me the reference architecture where it is for each of these scenarios. Is it the same reference architecture? Is it multi-cloud? Is it single cloud? Is it vendor agnostic that you want? So what are the attributes? What are the drivers that are influencing? Take all of them, then you would be in a much better position to create that template yourself now.
Okay, got it.
Got it, right? So I'll share you some data that you can actually use for the principles and drivers. So I think in between, we can actually discuss that when you're ready again.
Yeah. So I mean, share me that principles thing, and the other thing is also if you can get some strategy documents, which some like if somebody has already defined, which I can use as a reference, that would be great. I think yeah, this is
I will
what
search and
it's,
try to send it to you over email.
yeah, and just attach this. How will I get this data?
This
Which
one I'll record all of this stuff. This document I'll send it to you right away, and the
hmm.
recording I'll anyway be uploading it so that you can actually take a look at it.
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
Sure, right?
Yeah. So maybe I think that's it for now. I'll go through this. I'll get some overall grasp of what we have spoken. If there are any doubts, I'll revert back to you. And yeah, the next thing maybe I can plan is something like buzzword which is going on, which is maybe we can stop the recording now.
Yeah, I'll do that.